The night I realized she meant everything to me was the same night I almost lost her. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed with a steady hum that sounded far too calm for a place where lives could change in a single moment. I sat alone in a hard plastic chair outside the intensive care unit at St. Matthew's Medical Center, staring at a pair of closed doors that hadn't opened in nearly an hour. My white dress shirt was wrinkled. My tie hung loose around my neck. For the first time in years, I couldn't remember the last order I had given, the last meeting I had attended, or the last phone call I had answered. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the woman on the other side of those doors. A nurse walked past carrying a clipboard. Somewhere down the hallway, a monitor beeped softly. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Everything felt painfully ordinary, which somehow made it worse. The world kept moving while mine had stopped. My hands rested on my knees. There were faint stains on my sleeves from earlier that evening. I stared at them without really seeing them. 3 months ago, if someone had told me I would spend an entire night sitting in a hospital praying for one person to open her eyes, I would have laughed. Not because I didn't care about people. I did, in my own way. But my life had always been built on control. Problems were solved. Risks were managed. Emotions were locked away where they couldn't interfere with judgment. That was how I survived. That was how I built everything I had. Then Olivia Carter walked into my life and slowly destroyed every rule I had ever lived by. The worst part was that I never saw it happening. I told myself she was only a responsibility, a promise I had made to someone who could no longer ask anything of me, a duty, nothing more. I repeated those words so many times that eventually I believed them, or at least I thought I did. A doctor emerged from a nearby room and spoke quietly with another family waiting down the corridor. The mother started crying. The father wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I looked away, my chest felt tight. Not fear exactly, something deeper, something heavier, the kind of feeling that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. My phone vibrated in my pocket for what must have been the 20th time that night. I didn't check it. Whoever needed me could wait. The city could wait. My businesses could wait. Every problem in my world could wait until I knew whether Olivia was going to be okay. I leaned forward and rested my elbows on my knees. The polished hospital floor reflected the pale overhead lights. Everything felt cold, empty, quiet. My mind drifted backward despite my efforts to stop it. Back to the day it all began. Back to the funeral. Back to the promise. Back to the moment my older brother looked at me with his final ounce of strength and asked me to protect someone he cared about. I remembered standing beside his hospital bed. I remembered nodding. I remembered believing it would be simple. Take care of Olivia. Make sure she was safe. Honor his memory. I almost laughed at how wrong I had been. The ICU doors remained closed. Every second felt longer than the last. I rubbed a hand across my face and stared at the floor. 3 months ago, I told everyone she was just a responsibility. Tonight, I would have traded every dollar I owned, every building with my name on it, every ounce of influence I possessed, just to hear Olivia Carter say my name one more time. 6 months earlier, rain tapped softly against the stained glass windows of St. Andrew's Chapel as I stood in the back row wearing a black suit that suddenly felt 10 pounds heavier than it should have. The service had ended 20 minutes ago, but most of the guests had already left. Only a handful remained, speaking in hushed voices near the entrance. The scent of lilies lingered in the air. I hated lilies. My brother had loved them. That seemed unfair somehow. Michael Moretti had spent his entire life bringing warmth into every room he entered. Even now, after it was gone, the world insisted on reminding me of him. I stared at the framed photograph beside the altar. He was smiling in it. Of course he was. Michael was always smiling. I folded my arms and looked away. Grief was not something I handled well. I preferred problems that could be solved. Contracts could be negotiated. Businesses could be rebuilt. Mistakes could be corrected. Death did not care about any of those things. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor behind me. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. Anthony Russo had worked with my family for over 20 years. If Michael trusted anyone besides me, it had been Anthony. "Everyone is heading to the reception," he said quietly. "You should come." I am not in the mood for speeches. Neither was your brother. That earned a faint smile I could not quite suppress. Anthony stepped beside me and adjusted his tie. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he handed me a small envelope. My name was written across the front in Michael's handwriting. My chest tightened immediately. "What is this?" I asked. He left instructions. I stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Inside was a folded letter. The paper trembled slightly in my hand as I unfolded it. Michael's familiar handwriting filled the page. Damien, if you are reading this, then I was right about one thing. You never listen when I tell you to slow down. I swallowed hard. Trust him to begin a letter like that. I continued reading. There is someone I need you to look after. Her name is Olivia Carter. She will never ask for help, even when she needs it. She is stubborn, independent, kind to people who do not deserve it. She was there for me during one of the hardest periods of my life, and I owe her more than I can ever repay. If I am gone, promise me she will not face the world alone. I lowered the letter slowly. Who is Olivia Carter? Anthony asked. Someone my brother cared about, enough to put her in his final letter. I looked down at the page again. There was one final line at the bottom. Please do not push her away the way you push everyone else away. I almost laughed. Even from beyond the grave, Michael still believed he could fix me. Find her, I said. Anthony nodded once. Already done. Of course he had. He handed me a file folder. Inside was a photograph. A woman stood outside a community health clinic holding a cardboard tray of coffee cups. Wind caught a few strands of her blonde hair. She was laughing at something outside the frame. There was nothing remarkable about the picture. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, no signs of wealth or influence. She looked completely ordinary. Yet for some reason I found myself studying her longer than necessary. She works 12-hour shifts, Anthony said. Lives alone. Keeps mostly to herself. I closed the folder. Arrange a meeting. Personal or professional? Neither. I slipped Michael's letter into my jacket pocket. She is a responsibility. Nothing more. At the time, I believed every word. The first time I met Olivia Carter, she was standing on a step stool arguing with a smoke detector. I watched through the open doorway of her apartment while she pointed a wooden spoon at the ceiling and said, "You have been beeping every 30 seconds for 2 days. At this point, I am convinced you are doing it on purpose." The smoke detector answered with another sharp chirp. Olivia sighed dramatically and climbed down from the stool. That was the exact moment she noticed me standing there. Her blue eyes widened. Oh my God, she pressed a hand against her chest. How long have you been standing there? Long enough to know you are losing an argument. I was winning until you showed up. I looked around the apartment. It was small, maybe 600 square feet. A bookshelf filled one wall. Several framed photographs sat on a side table. There was a half-finished cup of coffee beside a stack of medical journals. Nothing about the place matched the people I usually dealt with. It felt lived in, warm, real. You are Damien Moretti, she said. That depends on who is asking. The man who sent flowers after Michael passed away. Her expression softened slightly. Thank you for that. Hearing my brother's name still felt strange, like touching a bruise that had not healed yet. Olivia stepped aside. You might as well come in. Unless you came all the way here just to judge my smoke detector problem. I entered reluctantly. The smell of vanilla candles lingered in the air. Outside, afternoon sunlight filtered through the window above the sink. She pulled a chair away from the kitchen table and sat down. So, she said, what exactly brings New York's most intimidating businessman to my apartment? Businessman? I asked. That is the reputation I am choosing to believe. I almost smiled. Almost. Michael asked me to check on you. Her gaze dropped briefly to the table. That sounds like him. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. He spoke about you often, I said. Only good things, I hope. Mostly. That earned a laugh, a genuine one. The sound caught me off guard. Well, she said, standing again, you can tell him I am doing fine. I cannot. The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room became quiet. Olivia looked away first. Right, she whispered. I keep forgetting there is no one left to report back to. Something tightened in my chest. I did not like it. I liked it even less when I realized she was trying not to cry. You should not be alone right now, I said. Excuse me, you work long hours. You live by yourself. Michael was worried about you. Michael worried about everyone. He asked me personally. Olivia crossed her arms. And what exactly does that mean? I took a slow breath. It means I have a house with more empty rooms than I know what to do with. You are inviting me to move into your mansion, temporarily, because you feel sorry for me, because I made a promise. Her expression changed. Not anger, not disappointment, something more complicated. You know, she said softly, most people ask before rearranging someone's entire life. Most people are not me, clearly. Another silence followed. Then she surprised me by smiling. You are just as stubborn as Michael said. That runs in the family. And if I say no, I will keep asking. Olivia shook her head. That sounds exhausting. It probably will be. For the first time that afternoon, her smile reached her eyes. Looking back now, I should have recognized the moment everything began to change. But I did not. I still believed I was there because of a promise. I still believed I was helping my brother keep watch over someone he cared about. What I failed to understand was that the woman standing in front of me was already changing the atmosphere of every room she entered, including mine. Olivia moved into the guest wing 3 days later, and within a week she had somehow accomplished something none of my executives, advisors, or employees had managed to do in years. She changed the atmosphere of the house. I noticed it first on a Tuesday morning. Sunlight spilled through the tall kitchen windows as I walked downstairs at 6:30, already thinking about meetings waiting for me in Manhattan. Normally the kitchen was silent except for the hum of expensive appliances and the occasional footsteps of staff members. That morning I heard music, soft music, something cheerful. I followed the sound and stopped in the doorway. Olivia stood at the counter wearing blue scrubs and pouring coffee into a travel mug. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose ponytail. She was singing quietly to herself while packing a lunch. She looked over and nearly dropped the lid. "You walk very quietly. You sing very loudly." That was rude. It was accurate. She narrowed her eyes. "There is fresh coffee if you are interested in becoming a slightly nicer person." I glanced toward the counter. A second mug sat beside hers. Steam curled upward into the morning air. "You made coffee for me?" "I made too much coffee," she corrected. "That second cup just happens to exist. I took the mug anyway." The coffee was exactly how I liked it. Not too strong, not too sweet. I stared at it suspiciously. "How did you know?" the housekeeper told me. "You interrogated the staff?" "I prefer the term friendship." She smiled before grabbing her bag. "Have a good day, Damien." Then she was gone. The front door closed. Silence returned. Yet somehow it felt different. Later that evening, I discovered several members of the household staff gathered around the dining room table laughing. In my house, for years they had treated the place like a luxury hotel, efficient, professional, quiet. Now there were fresh flowers in a vase near the windows. A bowl of homemade cookies sat on the counter. Someone had even placed photographs in frames that had been sitting untouched in storage for years. "What happened here?" I asked. Maria, the head housekeeper, looked up. "Miss Carter happened." I frowned. "That is not an explanation. She convinced everyone to eat dinner together." "Why?" Maria shrugged. "She said no one should have to eat alone every night." I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Then I walked away before anyone noticed I was listening. The changes continued. Olivia remembered birthdays. She learned everyone's names. She somehow convinced my gardener to teach her how to care for roses. She left handwritten thank you notes for people who helped her. She even convinced Anthony to smile twice in the same week, which should have been physically impossible. One evening I returned home after a 14-hour workday. Rain streaked across the windows. My shoulders ached. My patience was gone. I expected to find the house empty. Instead, I found Olivia sitting on the library floor surrounded by books. A blanket covered her legs. A half-finished cup of tea rested beside her. "You know there are chairs in this room," I said. She looked up from her novel. "The floor is comfortable." "That is objectively false. You should try it sometime." I loosened my tie. "I have work. You always have work. That is how work functions." She laughed. The sound echoed through the room. For reasons I could not explain, some of the tension left my shoulders. Olivia studied me for a second. "Long day?" "Very." "Then sit down for 5 minutes." 5 minutes accomplishes nothing. 5 minutes can accomplish quite a lot. I should have left. Instead, I sat in the chair across from her. 5 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. We talked about books, hospitals, Michael, life. For the first time in months, I found myself forgetting about deadlines and responsibilities. When she finally stood to leave, the room felt strangely empty. I watched her disappear down the hallway and stared at the abandoned teacup on the floor. That was the moment I realized something dangerous had begun. I looked forward to seeing her. And for a man who had spent years keeping people at a distance, that realization was far more unsettling than I wanted to admit. The storm arrived just after sunset. I noticed it first through the floor-to-ceiling windows in my office as dark clouds swallowed the last traces of daylight above the city skyline. By 8 o'clock, rain hammered against the glass in steady waves, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and silver. I should have been focused on the reports spread across my desk. Instead, I found myself staring at the weather. Or maybe I was waiting for an excuse to stop working. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the room. 1 second later, the entire house went dark. The lamps died, the computer screen vanished. Silence rushed in, followed by the distant sound of someone groaning dramatically from somewhere downstairs. I already knew who it was. I grabbed my phone and walked into the hallway. Emergency feeds glowed faintly along the walls. As I reached the staircase, another flash of lightning brightened the house. Olivia stood at the bottom, holding a flashlight beneath her chin like a child telling ghost stories. "Excellent," she announced. "Now the mansion is haunted. You are 27 years old. And yet the ghosts do not seem concerned about that." I shook my head. "The backup generator should activate soon. Anthony already checked. Something is wrong with it." Of course something was wrong with it. The one night I might have finished work early, the universe decided to intervene. Olivia smiled. "Since technology has abandoned us, I have a proposal." "That sounds dangerous." "Board games." "Absolutely not. You did not even let me finish." "I did not need to." 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from her in the library while rain pounded against and a collection of battery-powered lanterns cast soft golden light around the room. The board game sat between us. I was losing badly. "You cheated," I said. "I am a nurse, Damien, not a criminal mastermind." That answer was suspiciously specific. Olivia laughed so hard she nearly knocked over her mug of hot chocolate. The sound filled the room, warm, effortless, real. I realized then how rarely I heard genuine laughter in my life. Most conversations around me were strategic, calculated, measured. Olivia never seemed to operate that way. She said what she thought, felt what she felt. It was both confusing and strangely refreshing. Hours passed without either of us noticing. We moved from board games to stories. Stories became conversations. Conversations became memories. At some point, the storm outside faded into the background. "Michael used to talk about you," Olivia said quietly. The smile left my face. "Did he?" She nodded. "All the time." "That is unfortunate. He worried about you." I stared into the lantern light. "Everyone worried about me." "No." Her voice softened. "He loved you." The words settled heavily between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Somewhere deep inside the house, old pipes creaked. "I spent years believing he was stronger than me," I admitted. "Maybe he was." "No." Olivia shook her head immediately. "He was kinder than you." I raised an eyebrow. "That was not an improvement." "Trust me, it was." I laughed despite myself. The sound surprised both of us. Olivia smiled, not the teasing smile she usually wore, something gentler, more vulnerable. For several seconds, we simply looked at each other across the lantern light. There was no awkwardness, no pressure, just an unfamiliar sense of peace. The kind I had spent years trying to find in expensive offices, private clubs, and endless achievements without success. Around midnight, the power finally returned. Lights flickered back to life throughout the house. The moment shattered instantly. Olivia blinked against the brightness. "Well," she said softly, "looks like civilization survived." I stood slowly. "Apparently." She gathered the game pieces and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. "Thank you for tonight." I frowned. "You forced me to play 3 different board games. And yet somehow you survived." She disappeared down the hallway before I could answer. I remained alone in the library, staring at the empty chair she had occupied for the last 4 hours. For the first time, a thought entered my mind that I should have recognized as dangerous. The best part of my day had not been closing a deal, solving a problem, or winning a negotiation. It had been spending an evening with Olivia Carter, and that realization stayed with me long after the storm had passed. The change began after the storm. At least that was when I stopped pretending I did not notice it. I found myself looking for Olivia in every room I entered. If she worked late at the clinic, I checked the clock more often than usual. If she skipped breakfast, I noticed the empty chair. If she smiled, my day improved. None of that made sense, so I ignored it. That was my solution to most personal problems. Ignore them until they disappeared. Unfortunately, Olivia Carter had never been the type of problem that disappeared. 2 weeks after the storm, I was standing in my office reviewing contracts when Anthony walked in carrying a folder. He placed it on my desk and glanced toward the hallway. "You have a visitor downstairs. Tell them to schedule an appointment. She already lives here." My attention shifted immediately. Anthony noticed. Of course he noticed. "Olivia? She baked something." I frowned. "Why does that sound threatening?" "Because she asked everyone to try it." "And?" "We survived." Before I could answer, my phone rang. A business call, another meeting, another negotiation. By the time I finished, it was nearly an hour later. I stepped into the hallway and found Olivia arranging flowers in a vase near the staircase. Afternoon sunlight poured through the windows behind her. She looked up and smiled. "There you are." 3 simple words. Yet somehow they felt more welcoming than any greeting I had received in years. Anthony informed me about the baking experiment. It was a success. "That remains under investigation." She laughed and rolled her eyes. "You are impossible." I have been told that before. For a second, neither of us looked away. Something unspoken lingered between us. Something new, something dangerous. Then my phone buzzed again. The moment disappeared. That evening, several of my senior associates arrived unexpectedly for a private meeting. Discussions ran late. Numbers, contracts, expansion plans, the usual conversations that consumed most of my life. Around 10 o'clock, Anthony remained behind after everyone else left. He closed the office door and sat across from me. There is something I should mention. I already disliked the tone of his voice. "What? You look happier. Leave. I am serious. That was your first mistake." Anthony ignored me completely. "The staff notices it too. The staff needs hobbies." "And Olivia?" My jaw tightened immediately. Anthony saw the reaction inside. "There it is." "There is what?" "The look." "I do not have a look. You absolutely have a look." I stood and walked toward the window. Manhattan glittered in the distance beneath the night sky. "You are imagining things." "Am I?" I folded my arms. "Olivia is Michael's responsibility. I made a promise. That is all." Anthony studied me carefully. "If that is what you need to tell yourself, it happens to be the truth." The conversation ended there, or at least I thought it did. What I did not know was that the office door had never fully latched. What I did not know was that Olivia had come upstairs carrying a plate of cookies she wanted to leave outside my office. What I did not know was that she had heard every word. The next morning felt wrong immediately. The second cup of coffee was gone from the kitchen counter. No music played from her phone. No cheerful greeting waited when I walked downstairs. The house felt colder somehow, empty. I found Olivia near the front entrance preparing to leave for work. "You are leaving early," I said. "Busy day." Her answer came too quickly, too politely. She would not meet my eyes. A knot formed in my stomach. "Olivia." She finally looked at me. There was a smile on her face. It just did not reach her eyes anymore. "Have a good day, Damien." Then she walked out the door. I stood there listening to the silence she left behind, completely unaware that 3 careless sentences had just broken something neither of us knew how to fix. For the next 2 weeks, Olivia slowly disappeared from my daily life without ever actually leaving the house. That was the strange part. She was still there. I saw her at breakfast sometimes. I heard her footsteps in the hallway. I passed her in the kitchen. Yet the easy conversations were gone. The laughter was gone. The warmth she carried into every room seemed carefully locked away whenever I was near. At first I told myself I was imagining it. Then I started noticing the details. She no longer left coffee waiting for me in the morning. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped sitting in the library at night. Every small habit I had unconsciously come to expect simply vanished. One evening I found myself standing outside the library door staring at an empty armchair. The realization irritated me more than it should have. I was a grown man, a busy man, yet somehow I missed conversations about books and terrible board games. I missed hearing her laugh at her own jokes. The following Friday, Anthony handed me a folder during a meeting. "What is this?" I asked. "A charity proposal." "Why are you giving it to me?" "Because Olivia is involved." My attention sharpened instantly. Anthony pretended not to notice. He was becoming increasingly annoying. I opened the folder and found photographs from a healthcare funding project in Brooklyn. Olivia appeared in several of them. In every picture she was smiling. Standing beside her was a man I had never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, confident. His hand rested casually against the back of a chair while he spoke with a group of volunteers. "Who is he?" I asked. "Ethan Brooks." Should I know that name? "He runs the foundation funding the project." I looked back at the photograph. Ethan seemed comfortable beside her. Too comfortable. Interesting. Anthony leaned back in his chair. "Is it?" "No." You looked at his picture for 20 seconds. I was analyzing the event. "Of course you were." I ignored him. Unfortunately, the image remained in my mind for the rest of the day. 3 nights later, I attended a charity gala because several important donors expected me there. Normally, I would have stayed for 30 minutes and left. Instead, I found myself scanning the crowd the second I arrived. I spotted Olivia across the ballroom near a display table covered in fundraising brochures. She wore a dark blue dress, simple, elegant. Her hair fell over one shoulder. She looked happy, genuinely happy. Then Ethan appeared beside her carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. She accepted one and smiled up at him. Something unpleasant settled in my chest. "Boss." Anthony appeared beside me. "You have been staring for almost a minute." "Have I?" "Yes." I looked away immediately. Unfortunately, my eyes returned a few seconds later. Ethan said something that made Olivia laugh. Not the polite laugh she used with strangers, the real one. The one I had not heard in weeks. "Who is he to her?" I asked. Anthony nearly choked on his drink. "That question sounded remarkably personal. Answer it." "From what I understand, they have been working together frequently." I watched Ethan pull out a chair for her at a nearby table. She thanked him. He smiled. She smiled back. The knot in my chest tightened. For the first time, I understood something I had been refusing to admit. Olivia was building a life that did not revolve around me. A life filled with people who appreciated her openly instead of hiding behind excuses and promises. The realization should have made me happy. Instead, it made the ballroom feel strangely cold. Anthony followed my gaze and sighed. You know what your problem is? I have many. Be specific, you waited too long. Across the room, Olivia smiled again as Ethan leaned closer to hear something she said. And for the first time in months, I found myself wishing I was the reason for that smile. The charity gala should have been forgettable. Another ballroom, another collection of speeches, donors, and photographs. Yet it became the night that changed everything. I arrived late. Rain had started falling again. Soft drops streaking across the windows overlooking Manhattan. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble floors. A string quartet played somewhere near the stage. The room buzzed with conversation. Normally, I could walk into a crowded ballroom and immediately identify the most important person present. That night, I only looked for one person. I found Olivia near the center of the room. She was speaking with several donors, her hands moving animatedly as she described the foundation's latest healthcare project. People listened to her, really listened. It was impossible not to. She had always possessed a quiet kind of gravity, the sort that made people feel seen. I stood across the room longer than I should have, watching her smile, watching her belong somewhere that had nothing to do with me. You are doing it again. Anthony appeared beside me, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. Doing what? Pretending you are not staring. I took 1 glass. I am observing, of course. Then his expression shifted slightly. You should know something. That usually means I do not want to. Ethan plans to tell her tonight. The noise of the ballroom suddenly seemed more distant. Tell her what? Anthony looked at me like I was the slowest man in New York. That he cares about her. I stared at him. You are guessing. No. How do you know? Because unlike you, some men actually say what they feel. The words landed harder than I wanted to admit. Across the room, Ethan approached Olivia carrying 2 drinks. She accepted one. They exchanged a smile. Then they moved toward the terrace overlooking the city. My chest tightened immediately. I hated the feeling. Hated the helplessness of it. Hated that for the first time in my life, there was a problem I could not solve with influence, money, or determination. Because Ethan was not a bad man. He was kind, successful, honest. Everything a woman deserved. Everything I was not sure I could ever be. I followed them outside without thinking. Not close enough to hear every word, just close enough to see. Rain tapped gently against the glass roof above the terrace. City lights stretched endlessly beyond the skyline. Olivia stood near the railing while Ethan spoke. His expression was calm, earnest, genuine. Then I saw him reach into his jacket pocket and hand her something. A small envelope. Olivia looked surprised. Ethan said something else. She smiled softly. Not the polite smile she gave strangers. A real one. My stomach dropped. For one terrible moment, I imagined her saying yes to a future that did not include me. A future where she woke up beside someone who appreciated her openly. Someone who never called her a responsibility. Someone who never made her doubt her worth. Anthony had been right. I had waited too long. My phone suddenly vibrated once, twice, 3 times. I ignored it. Then Anthony appeared in the doorway. His face had gone pale. Every instinct in my body sharpened instantly. Damien. His voice was unusually serious. We need to leave. What happened? Now. Something in his expression erased every other thought. I looked back toward the terrace. Olivia and Ethan were still talking, still smiling, completely unaware that the night was about to change direction. Minutes later, we were leaving the event when chaos erupted near the service entrance. Not violence, not panic, just confusion. People moving quickly, staff members calling for assistance. A vehicle had lost control during the rain outside the building, creating a dangerous situation near the curb where several guests had been walking. By the time I reached the entrance, emergency responders were already arriving. Bright lights flashed against wet pavement. Crowds gathered behind barriers. My heart stopped when I saw a familiar blue dress among the people being helped by paramedics. Olivia. I pushed through the crowd before anyone could stop me. She was conscious but shaken. Rain soaked her hair. A paramedic wrapped a blanket around her shoulders while checking her vital signs. Olivia. She looked up. Relief flooded her eyes the moment she saw me. And in that instant, standing beneath cold rain and flashing lights, one truth hit me with devastating clarity. I was not afraid of losing Olivia because she was part of a promise. I was afraid of losing her because I loved her. The first thing I heard was the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. Soft, consistent, beautiful. I opened my eyes and found myself staring at the same hospital hallway where I had spent the longest night of my life. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows now, painting pale gold across the floor. For a moment I simply sat there, listening. Then a doctor stepped out of Olivia's room and offered a tired smile. She is awake. I do not remember crossing the hallway. I only remember opening the door and seeing her sitting up in bed. Her blonde hair was slightly messy. A book rested in her lap. The sight of her nearly brought me to my knees. Olivia looked up. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled softly. "You look terrible." Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. "That is the first thing you say? Someone had to tell you." I pulled a chair closer and sat beside her. The room fell quiet again. Sunlight touched the edge of her blanket. Somewhere outside, a nurse laughed at something down the hall. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary moments. Yet nothing had ever felt more important. "You scared me," I admitted. Olivia's smile faded. "I am sorry. Do not apologize." My voice came out rougher than intended. "Just do not do it again." She studied me carefully. "Damien." "What? Why are you really here?" There it was. The question I had spent months avoiding, the truth I had hidden behind promises, responsibilities, and excuses. I looked down at my hands before finally meeting her eyes. "Because I love you." The words hung between us. Simple, honest, terrifying. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, there was sadness there. "Do you know what hurt the most?" she asked quietly. I already knew. "Hearing me call you a responsibility," she nodded. "I spent weeks wondering if every conversation mattered less to you than it did to me." Guilt settled heavily in my chest. I was wrong. "I know, no, Olivia, I was a coward." She blinked in surprise. "I convinced myself that keeping you at a distance would protect me." My voice softened. "The truth is, I stopped thinking of you as a responsibility a long time ago." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Then why did you say it?" "Because admitting the truth would have changed everything. Because loving her meant risking loss. Because I had spent years building walls and did not know how to live without them. Yet none of those reasons sounded good enough anymore. Because I was afraid," I said honestly. Silence followed. Not angry silence, not cold silence. Just two people standing in the middle of a truth that had arrived too late. "I care about you," Olivia whispered. "I always will." Hope flickered inside me. Then she added, "But I need time." I nodded immediately. "Take all the time you need." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Olivia left the hospital 3 days later. She did not return to the mansion. She moved into a small apartment closer to her work. She continued helping people, continued building a life that belonged entirely to her. I did not interfere. I did not send gifts. I did not pressure her. Instead, I learned something unfamiliar. Patience. Weeks passed, then months. One autumn afternoon, I attended a healthcare fundraiser in Brooklyn. No security detail, no entourage, just me. Olivia stood near the stage, speaking with volunteers. When she noticed me, surprise crossed her face. "Damien," I smiled nervously, a feeling that would have shocked anyone who knew me. "Can we talk?" We walked outside beneath strings of warm lights hanging above the courtyard. Leaves drifted across the sidewalk. The air smelled like coffee and rain. I handed her a small envelope. Inside was Michael's final letter, the original copy. The promise that had started everything. Olivia looked up. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I am not here because of a promise anymore." My heart pounded harder than it had during any negotiation of my career. "I am here because I love you." For a moment she simply stared at me. Then slowly, beautifully, she smiled. "Good," I swallowed. "Good?" Because I was never a responsibility either. She reached for my hand. I held on gently, as if the moment might disappear if I moved too quickly. The evening sun slipped below the buildings. People laughed somewhere behind us. Life continued moving forward. And for the first time, I was not afraid of what came next. Michael had asked me to protect Olivia. Instead, she became the person who saved me. And sometimes the greatest love stories do not begin when two people find each other. Sometimes they begin when one finally finds the courage to tell the truth.